You'll get nothing, old man. My son smirked across the Thanksgiving table, the turkey still steaming between us. His girlfriend laughed, clinking her wine glass like she'd already won. My chest tightened, but I stayed quiet. What they didn't notice was the dark SUV parked at the curb outside two men in suits watching the house. They thought I was powerless. But tonight, the truth would flip the whole table. Stay with me. You'll want to see how fast arrogance turns into handcuffs. Thanksgiving dinner was supposed to feel warm, but for me, it was just another reminder of how far I'd fallen in my own son's eyes. My name's Richard Callahan, 63 years old, retired auto plant supervisor, living in Columbus, Ohio. After my wife passed from cancer 5 years back, the house that once echoed with laughter now felt like a hollow shell. My son, Mark, barely called except when he needed money, or these days, when he wanted to remind me of how outdated I was. Mark was 32, a hotshot real estate broker downtown. Flashy suits, a condo with floor-to-ceiling windows, and a girlfriend who seemed more interested in his credit limit than his heart. He loved making digs at me about my tiny pension check and the way I clipped coupons before going to Kroger. Truth was, I wasn't broke. Not even close. My late wife and I had built a careful nest egg. Our mortgage was paid off, and I'd kept a 401k growing steady, but I never bragged about it. I was raised old school. Money wasn't for showing off. It was for protecting your family. Mark never understood that. That night, the table was covered in stuffing, sweet potato casserole, and my wife's recipe for cranberry relish I'd made myself. Mark didn't touch it. He'd ordered a tray of artisanal sides from some overpriced bistro. His girlfriend, Tiffany, rolled her eyes when I passed the dishes around. "Dad," Mark had said earlier, pouring bourbon into his glass, "maybe it's time you signed over the house. You don't need 4 bedrooms. You could downsize. I mean, I know a developer who'd pay top dollar for this property." I just smiled and told him, "This house isn't going anywhere, Mark. Not while I'm breathing." He smirked like I was some relic clinging to a past he'd already buried. That smirk stuck with me. What Mark didn't know, and what nobody at that table suspected, was that I'd already had a quiet conversation with a man in a dark suit weeks earlier. A federal agent. See, there had been strange envelopes showing up in my mailbox, letters from the IRS about unreported income linked to my address, flagged mortgage documents I'd never signed. And one afternoon, an FBI agent showed me a file with my son's name on the front: fraud, money laundering, real estate scams stacked a mile high. I hadn't told Mark, I hadn't told anyone. But every time I saw that black SUV idling at the end of the block, I knew the walls were closing in on him. So I sat at my own dinner table, letting him laugh, letting him treat me like nothing. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do in the moment, it's what you let time and truth do for you. The clink of Mark's bourbon glass against the table was sharp enough to cut through the hum of conversation. He leaned back in his chair, flashing that smug grin of his. "You know what, Dad?" he said, loud enough for Tiffany and my daughter, Emily, to hear. "You're lucky Mom passed when she did. At least she didn't have to watch you turn into this." The words hit me harder than any punch could have. Tiffany gave a soft laugh, like cruelty was entertainment and Emily sweet. Emily just shifted uncomfortably in her seat, staring down at her plate. I swallowed, choosing silence. Mark wasn't done. "You're sitting here with your Social Security check, scraping coupons, while I'm out there closing 6-figure deals before lunch. You think anyone cares you were a supervisor at some Rust Belt factory 20 years ago? The world's moved on, you're obsolete, old man." My fork clattered against the plate. I could feel my jaw tighten, but I forced myself to keep my tone even. "Mark, this house, this table, this dinner, you didn't build any of it. Your mother and I did." "Maybe show a little gratitude," he scoffed. "Gratitude? For what?" "For teaching me how to punch a time card and settle for mediocrity." "No thanks. I learned early that if I wanted more than this dump, I had to chase it myself." Emily finally spoke up. "Mark, stop. You're crossing a line." But he only laughed. "Of course you defend him, Emily. You're just like him, settling for scraps. Nursing job, tiny apartment, broke half the time. Don't act like you've got the moral high ground here. I watched my daughter's cheeks burn red as she pushed her plate away. My heart ached, not just for myself, but for her. She didn't deserve to be collateral in his war against me. Then Mark leaned forward, his voice dropping lower, crueler. Let's be real here, Dad. You're going to croak sooner rather than later. The only question is, do you leave us anything worth inheriting? Or do you die clutching onto this decaying house like some pathetic miser? That was the moment. The moment I saw the boy I'd raised was gone, replaced by a man drunk on greed. Tiffany laughed again. God, that sound was poison. He's right, Richard. It's time to pass the torch. Don't be selfish. I set my fork down carefully. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with restraint. This house isn't just wood and nails. It's where your mother took her last breath. It's where I raised you, Mark. You'll get nothing from me if all you can see is dollar signs. He smirked, leaned back again, and with a mocking laugh, repeated the words like a curse. You'll get nothing, old man? No, Dad, you'll get nothing. The room went quiet except for the hiss of the radiator. Emily wiped her eyes. I sat there, humiliated in my own home, at my own table, being stripped of dignity by my own blood. Mark didn't stop there. He pulled out his phone and, in front of us all, started scrolling through pictures of his new condo, his car, the Rolex on his wrist. See this? He said, waving the screen at me. This is what success looks like. Maybe if you'd thought bigger, I wouldn't have had to drag myself out of this backwater life you built. Tiffany chimed in, honestly, Richard, you should be thanking Mark. He's proof your bloodline isn't all working-class dead ends. Every word was a knife, twisted deeper, but I stayed silent. Not because I was weak, but because I knew something they didn't. Every insult, every sneer, every cruel laugh, none of it mattered. Not compared to the truth sitting quietly in a locked folder in an FBI office downtown. I lifted my glass, sipped my water, and looked Mark in the eye. Keep laughing, son, I said softly. Keep laughing while you still can. He chuckled, thinking he'd won. But what he didn't know was that pride comes before the fall. And his fall was already in motion. The next week I got a call that changed everything. Mr. Crawford, a deep voice said, clipped and professional. This is Agent Miller with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. We need to talk about your son. I froze in my kitchen, my hand gripping the receiver so hard my knuckles turned white. My son? I managed. What about him? Miller's tone was steady, but there was a weight behind his words. We have reason to believe Mark Crawford has been involved in fraudulent activities, securities fraud, falsified loan documents, possibly tax evasion. We can't disclose everything yet, but we'd like your cooperation. I sank into the kitchen chair. For years I'd suspected Mark was living above his means, Rolexes, imported cars, that shiny condo in Boston, but hearing the FBI confirm it was another matter. Miller continued, We're not asking you to incriminate him. But we do need context. Has he pressured you financially? Asked for signatures? Access to your estate? Images flashed in my mind. The sneering face at the dinner table. The way he'd mocked me for not handing over my property. The way Tiffany egged him on. My voice was steady when I answered. Yes, he's been pushing for my inheritance early. He even hinted at getting me to sign over the deed. There was a pause. That fits the pattern we're seeing, Miller said. We believe he and his wife may have already attempted to forge documents. You'll need to be careful, Mr. Crawford, very careful. For the first time in weeks, I felt something unexpected relief. Not joy, not vindication, just the quiet weight of truth finally shifting to my side after the call. I rang Emily. When she picked up, her voice was still soft, hurt from that dinner. Dad, sweetheart, I said gently, I need you to listen to me. You were right to walk out that night. Mark's in trouble. Real trouble, she sighed. I knew something was off. The way he talks like he's untouchable, I didn't think it was this bad. He's been lying to all of us, I said. But Emily, we don't fight him with anger. We fight him with proof. That evening, Frank Donovan showed up at my door, my old buddy turned private investigator. He tossed a manila folder onto my kitchen table. You were right, Richard. The kid's in over his head. Unpaid credit lines, shell companies in Delaware, and get this, he used your name as a guarantor on one of the loans. Forged signature. I opened the folder, my stomach twisted. There it was in black ink, my name, copied sloppily at the bottom. Of a contract I'd never seen, Frank leaned back, his arms crossed. If the FBI's sniffing around, this is just the tip of the iceberg, but here's the kicker, he's planning something big. A dinner next week, wants you there. From what? I hear he's bringing a lawyer. I almost laughed. It was all falling into place. My son thought he was laying a trap. He didn't know I already saw the wires. I tapped the folder. Then I'll be there. But we're going to turn the lights on in his little show. Frank grinned. That's the spirit. Just remember, Richard, he's your blood, but the law doesn't care about family ties once fraud's on the table. I nodded, staring at that forged signature. The humiliation from last week still burned in my chest. But now it was tempered with something sharper. Resolve. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the old man at the table being laughed at. I felt like a man holding the match to a fuse, and Mark? He had no idea the explosion was coming. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my recliner in the living room, staring at the folder Frank had left me. My forged signature stared back like a ghost. Every line of ink felt like a betrayal written in my own blood. But as the minutes ticked into hours, something else crept in memory. Not the kind you flip through like an old photo album, but the kind that digs its claws in, demanding to be felt. I thought about the years I'd spent building the Crawford name. I wasn't born with money. My father was a steel worker in Pittsburgh. Hands always raw and calloused, lungs lined with soot. I worked construction through college, hauling bricks by day and studying business by night. When I finally scraped enough together to buy my first rental property, I slept on the hardwood floors because I couldn't afford furniture. Every dollar I made went back into the business. By the time I was 45, I'd built a small reel. Estate portfolio, nothing flashy, just steady. Duplexes, modest homes, one commercial lot near Worcester. Enough to cover my mortgage, enough to set aside for retirement. That was my empire. My legacy, but building it cost me something I didn't realize at the time. My family. I missed Mark's Little League games. Missed Emily's piano recitals. I told myself I was doing it for them, but kids don't measure love in bank balances. They measure it in time. Mark especially. He always wanted more of me. He'd follow me around the garage with his toy hammer, asking questions about when he could own buildings like Dad. I thought it was cute. I thought it meant he admired me. But maybe what he wanted wasn't the buildings. Maybe he just wanted me. And when I wasn't there, he learned to chase the buildings instead. When he was 17, he begged me for a Mustang. All his friends had flashy cars, he said. I told him no, told him to earn it. I worked for every dime I've got, I said. You'll do the same. He didn't forgive me. Not then, not ever. Emily, she understood sacrifice. She put herself through nursing school, working nights at a diner. She never asked me for a cent, but Mark felt entitled. I didn't see it at first. I thought he was just ambitious. But ambition without humility? That's a bomb waiting to go off. By the time he hit his 20s, I'd already bailed him out twice. Credit card debt, a failed business venture in Providence. Each time, Tiffany whispered in his ear, pushing him to take more, risk more. And like a fool, I signed the checks. I thought I was protecting him. Truth is, I was enabling him. That's the part that hurts the most. This monster he's become? I helped build it. I rubbed my temples, the weight of regret pressing down. But alongside the regret came clarity. Because if I helped create this mess, then maybe, just maybe, I could be the one to end it. I wasn't defenseless. Over the years, I'd made friends in quiet places. My lawyer, Ellis McCord, wasn't just some paper pusher. He'd handled complex estate cases for 2 decades, the kind that ripped families apart in courtrooms. He'd once told me, Richard, your best defense is always being 10 steps ahead. I'd taken that to heart. And then there was Frank we'd met in the Marines, back when we were dumb kids carrying rifles in the desert. He went private after leaving the Corps, but he never lost that instinct for sniffing out lies. If anyone Could follow Mark's paper trail. It was frank. I'd also kept my own files. Decades of tax records, property deeds, trust documents, all meticulously organized. Mark thought I was some senile old man ready to hand it all over, but the truth? I'd been preparing my defenses for years. I leaned back in my chair, whispering to myself, "He thinks he's got me cornered, but he doesn't know the walls were mine to begin with." The past wasn't just a graveyard of mistakes, it was also a warehouse of weapons. Every sacrifice I'd made, every sleepless night building this legacy gave me leverage now. And maybe, just maybe, I could turn that leverage into justice. By dawn, I'd made my decision. I called Ellis first. His calm voice steadied me. "We'll restructure the trust, Richard. Lock it tighter than Fort Knox. Even if he drags you into court, he won't touch a dime." Then I called Frank. "Keep digging," I told him. "But don't just look for debts. Look for anything he signed in my name. We'll need evidence when the hammer falls." Finally, I called Emily. I told her everything, my mistakes, my regrets, and my plan. She listened quietly, then said something that nearly broke me. "Dad, you don't have to carry all the blame. Mark made his choices, but if you're going to fight him, fight to protect yourself, not out of guilt." Her words stuck. She was right. This wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. About reclaiming my dignity after years of being mocked, manipulated, and used. As I hung up, I looked again at that forged signature, my name, my blood, twisted against me. But now the tide was turning. The boy who once begged me for a Mustang was about to learn a hard truth. I wasn't the old man he could push around anymore. I was the father who'd spent a lifetime building walls, and this time, those walls weren't keeping me in. They were keeping him out. The dining room smelled of roasted turkey and garlic butter, Tiffany's specialty. Candles flickered across the long oak table, polished to perfection. On the surface, it looked like the perfect family dinner, but I knew better. This wasn't a gathering, it was an ambush. Mark sat at the head of the table, as if he owned the house already. His slicked back hair and tailored suit screamed arrogance. Tiffany floated beside him, pouring wine like she was the lady of the manor. Emily sat stiff on my left, trying to hold her tongue, but I could feel the tension vibrating through her. "Dad," Mark said, raising his glass, "let's toast to the future of the Crawford estate. Streamlined, efficient, modernized. I'll be managing things from now on, and Tiffany will handle the books." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Streamlined? That was his way of saying stolen. Emily cleared her throat. "Funny, I thought Dad was still alive and capable of handling his own affairs." Tiffany smirked. "Emily, sweetheart, no offense, but your father's not getting any younger. And real estate isn't nursing, it requires vision." Emily's jaw clenched, but she didn't bite back. She knew I had a plan. I set my fork down gently, the scrape echoing louder than it should have. "Mark, you've been very busy lately. Banks, investors, even my retirement accounts." Quite a reach for a man with no property of his own. His smile widened. "I told you, Dad, I'm preparing for the future." "Your generation clings to old ways. I'm simply accelerating things. The lawyers already drafted the necessary documents. You should be thanking me." I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his. "You mean the documents with my forged signature?" The table went silent. Tiffany's hand froze on the wine bottle. Emily sucked in a sharp breath. Mark chuckled, trying to brush it off. "Come on, Dad. Don't be dramatic. I'm just taking initiative. Everyone knows this estate was meant for me." I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Initiative is one thing. Fraud is another." That's when the doorbell rang. Mark waved his hand dismissively. "Ignore it. We're in the middle of dinner." But the doorbell rang again, followed by a firm knock. Emily glanced at me, her eyes questioning. I nodded. Tiffany stood, muttering about rude interruptions, and swept toward the foyer. A moment later, her high-pitched voice cracked through the hallway. Mark?" He looked annoyed, pushed back his chair, and strutted to the door. Seconds later, the sound of boots echoed against the hardwood floor. Then they entered. 3 agents in navy jackets with bold yellow letters, FBI. The room tilted for Mark. His confident smirk melted into confusion. "And horror, Mark Crawford?" the lead agent asked, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Mark stumbled back. There must be some mistake. The agent read from a folder. We have evidence of wire fraud, identity theft, and forgery connected to multiple financial accounts, including those belonging to Richard Crawford. You're under arrest, Emily gasped, covering her mouth. Tiffany dropped the wine bottle. Red liquid bled across the rug. I stayed seated, calm as stone. I told you, son. Fraud is another thing entirely. Mark spun to me, desperation in his eyes. You did this? You set me up? I shook my head slowly. No, Mark, you set yourself up. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences. The agents moved swiftly, pulling his hands behind his back and locking the cuffs with a metallic click that rang like justice in my ears. You'll get nothing, old man. Mark shouted, thrashing as they dragged him toward the door. Nothing! I stood then, rising with the steadiness of someone who'd carried the weight of guilt too long. That's where you're wrong, son. I've already got everything I need, my name, my integrity, and the daughter who stood by me. Emily's hand slipped into mine, squeezing hard. Tears ran down her cheeks, not of grief, but of vindication. Mark's. Protests faded into the night as the agents hauled him out. Tiffany, pale and shaking, slumped into a chair, muttering excuses under her breath. But nobody was listening. For the first time in years, I felt air filling my lungs without the burn of shame. The house, once suffocating with manipulation, finally felt like mine again. Emily whispered, Dad, you did it. I looked at her, pride swelling in my chest. No, Emily, we did it, because you believed in me when he didn't. Silence settled over the table, broken only by the crackle of candle flames. The turkey sat untouched, the wine soaking deeper into the rug, but none of that mattered. Tonight wasn't about food or tradition. It was about reclaiming what was mine and watching justice finally catch up to the son who thought he was untouchable. I sat back down, letting out a long exhale. The fight was over, but the lesson that was just beginning. The night after Mark's arrest, the house felt different, quieter, almost like it had exhaled all the poison it had been holding inside. For years, I'd dreaded family dinners, knowing they would end in manipulation or humiliation. But this time, there was peace. The next morning, Emily and I sat in the kitchen, sunlight pouring through the windows. She was sipping her coffee, her eyes still red from everything that had happened. But she was smiling. Dad, she said softly, I'm proud of you. I don't think I've ever said that out loud, but I swallowed hard. Hearing those words from my daughter meant more than any bank account or property deed. You kept me standing, Emily. Without you, I might have just let him take everything. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. That's what family is supposed to do. Not tear each other down, not steal, just stand together. Her words stayed with me when we went to court a month later. The hearing was public, the courtroom filled with reporters and strangers, curious about the downfall of a man who had tried to steal from his own father. Mark walked in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his arrogance stripped away. For the first time, he looked small. The prosecutor laid out the evidence, bank transfers, forged documents, even recordings of Mark bragging to Tiffany about how he'd have me out of the picture within weeks. My stomach churned hearing it, but it also confirmed everything I already knew. My son had chosen greed over blood. When the judge finally banged the gavel and read the sentence, 5 years in federal prison with restitution to me and penalties, to the bank, Mark's face went blank. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at Emily. He just stared ahead, as if the future he thought was guaranteed had turned to ash. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. Justice wasn't about celebration. It was about restoration. Afterward, Emily and I walked out of the courthouse together. The autumn air was crisp, the kind that makes you feel alive. Reporters shouted questions, but I ignored them. My fight wasn't for the headlines. It was for my dignity, my name, my family. That night, we set the table again. This time, just the two of us. A simple dinner: grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, and apple pie. We laughed, we talked, and for the first time in years, the house felt warm again. I raised my glass of iced tea. To fresh starts, Emily clinked her glass against mine. To knowing our worth, I nodded, my chest heavy with both sorrow and gratitude. Losing a son wasn't something I'd ever imagined, but gaining back my self-respect and strengthening the bond with my daughter, that was priceless. Here's the truth. I learned family isn't defined by blood alone. It's defined by loyalty, respect, and the courage to stand beside each other when the storm comes. Mark walked away from that definition a long time ago. Emily embraced it. For anyone listening to my story, I'll say this: don't let toxic love or manipulative relationships convince you that you're powerless. Stand up, speak up, and protect what's yours, even if it means walking away from people you thought you could never live without, because sometimes justice doesn't look like revenge. It looks like peace at your own dinner table. And as I sat there that night, the house finally mine again, I whispered the words that had been building in me for years. Blood may betray you, but truth never will. Sometimes the hardest truth we face is that the people we love most can hurt us the deepest. Richard's story isn't just about money or property. It's about dignity, respect, and the right to be valued as a human being, not just as a bank. In American culture, we pride ourselves on independence and self-reliance, but we also cling to the idea of family as a sacred bond. When that bond gets poisoned by greed or manipulation, it cuts to the bone. And yet, the lesson here is simple but powerful. You don't have to tolerate toxic love. Just because it's family. Richard learned that standing up for himself didn't mean he stopped being a father. It meant he finally respected himself enough to say enough is enough. By choosing truth and justice over silence, he protected his legacy and taught his daughter Emily the real meaning of loyalty. That's empowerment. That's love in action. For anyone watching, take this with you. You can't control how others treat you, but you can control the boundaries you set and the dignity you defend. If someone, even family, tries to strip you of your worth, you have every right to say no. Because at the end of the day, family isn't about blood. It's about trust, respect, and standing side by side through storms. So, protect your peace, defend your truth, and never let anyone laugh at your worth. Blood may betray you, but truth never will. Velvet Kiss Revenge.